I'm excited because this is a subject I know we're both, at least on this call, and that I know many others are passionate about, which is planning ahead because it's all
Yes.
about supporting people. We talked about systems that support people last week. We've been talking about how you can structure things so everyone on your team, your church, your ministry efforts can be healthy and effective. And I know this subject today that we're addressing particularly can be, kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like for many, many people
Yeah.
working in churches, not just in communications, but often in communications or creative work. The last minute requests, avoiding those.
Yes.
We're going to get into it, but it's not. You're not going to avoid them just by saying, "Please don't ask me last minute." There's going to be some other things that need to go into it, but we're going to set you up to win, for your team to win. So I'm excited to get into it. So. Um, and like when you're building teams, when you are building your communications department, when you're working with your church, the felt need we're kind of talking about here, like, does it feel impossible to stay ahead? Like, raise your hand, put it in the chat.
No.
If you're watching later, drop a thumbs up. Um, it can feel impossible to stay ahead. At least I know when I was communications director, I know for you too, Ryan, it can feel impossible sometimes to stay ahead and just like stay on top of all the communications channels, right?
Yeah.
Because there's social, there's emails, there's announcements. Which are they in-person announcements? Are they video announcements? Is there both? Are there multiple campuses? Is there online church versus in-person church? Which announcements go where? And then there's all the sub ministries, and they have their own announcements. And does that get announced in big church, or does that go in their specific ministry thing? And then there's all the sub weird things that your church might have too. You might have like the weird felt board that you put stuff on, or a bulletin board. I don't know what you got. That maybe there's the paper bulletin that you've been trying to get rid of for like
Totally.
5 years straight, and it's not happening. Or I've seen some people in Facebook groups, they got rid of it, but it made its way back. They
Yes.
couldn't keep it dead.
Yeah.
He is risen. Here
Yes.
it is. I know for me, when I was communications director, and I mentioned this when we started off this series, I inherited many things, many processes when I came in. And for my church, the kids, one of the things I inherited was the kids ministry could post whatever they wanted twice a week on social media, which kind of made it a headache for me to have a consistent social media plan, as well as try to fairly balance all ministry requests. Because, surprise, surprise, there's other ministries in the church besides, one ministry. Usually, there's many other sub ministries: kids, youth, men's, women's, whatever. And they're kind of like, why don't I get to post whatever I want,
Yep.
multiple times a week? So this kind of snowballed, not just with kids ministry, but with many ministries, into countless requests just piling up. Why can't you do it? It's for the kingdom. So that's kind of my problem that I had hands-on with this. Ryan, I know you had another experience.
Yeah. I mean, kind of similarly without good systems and in my early communication director day, it when the requests would pile up, a lot of the times our communications team, which was just me, one person, right? The answer had to be no. Be like just with the timeline we had, with I wouldn't be able to do it. Would try to figure out some way to say yes, some way to find a win, but oftentimes it just felt like our team ended up becoming the no people, and the reality is that our heart as a communications team was to collaborate and was to help our teams and ministries reach people and serve people, but without good systems, without planning ahead, we just built a reputation for having to say no a lot, which we didn't want to be, and so we had to earn some trust back. We had to put some systems in place to fix that problem. But I know for me that was a big thing that I wanted to change, and one of the biggest things that helped me move out of being known as the no people was getting ahead with planning via calendar. And calendars are not fun, they're not sexy, they're kind of boring, but they are so essential for a communications team that's trying to serve their ministry teams well. It's trying to move the mission and vision of the organization forward well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about calendar planning, getting ahead with calendar planning. And so one of the places we want to start was, what are some of the common problems that come from not having a regular rhythm of calendar planning with your teams. And if you're on a communications team at a church, let us know if any of these problems sound familiar, because they were everywhere when I was on the team. But without good calendar planning, what we experience oftentimes as a team are last minute requests. And then if it's not a last minute request, sometimes we feel like the way we execute the plan, the promotion, the event just didn't go as well as it could have. It wasn't as creative, wasn't as effective because we didn't have the amount of time to the proper amount of time to plan ahead and to really pour our creative energy into it. And then another one is, man, if we didn't execute that promotion well for, let's say, the kids ministry event, that oftentimes led to division and tension across the team and staff. Why didn't this go well? Why didn't we do better on this? And no one loves that. We didn't love that. And then ultimately for me, I know I found myself in seasons where when all those things stacked up, I just was personally burnt out and just saying, am I even good at this? Can I do this? So those are all common problems that we have experienced, both Andrew and I, when we don't have good calendar planning. But the good news is that those don't have to be problems forever. And we're going to talk today about how creating and entering a system of calendaring into your weekly, monthly, quarterly rhythms is going to help with these problems a ton. And some examples of how those solutions, like the solutions that came from calendar planning, what I saw a reduction in some of what we call those office drive-bys, right? I don't know if you've been in your office working and your head's down or something, teammate comes by and kind of pokes their head in like Kramer a bit or something and is like, "Hey, real quick, I've got an idea." That's what an office drive-by is in my mind. And those are just the hardest for me to process, right? Because I didn't even have a notepad out. I've got to now remember what the request was. So if you can get calendaring as a regular rhythm, it's going to reduce those office drive-bys. So that's one thing that calendaring helps with. Another one, kind of related to that second problem, if we can be asking the right questions months, weeks ahead in advance with enough runway, our team, the communications team, the creative team, we can help you execute your plan to its fullest potential. And we can get ahead on that if we have those regular calendar meetings. And again, if we are able to execute well and give plenty of time on the front end for even some input before, I mean, I don't know how many projects, Andrew, you know of, like where you just kind of had to push it out because the deadline was so close. You didn't even really have enough time to like ask the teams that you were helping on feedback on the front end. Does this look good? Is this working well? But if you can calendar, if you can get ahead, it helps them feel seen. It helps those ministry teams give their input and their voice into things on the front end, and that helps relieve their anxiety, right? That helps relieve the questions of, man, is this event gonna, or is anyone going to show up to this thing? If we give it enough time, then they're going to feel supported. They're going to feel successful, which is great. And then ultimately, the big one, we talk about this all the time in the ArtSpeak creative community, is that there's nothing like having a week where you're like, man, I don't really have to like pull my hair out this week to get stuff done. I don't have 6 deadlines that all need to be done before Sunday, and that just helps. Again, if you can get that place as a church creative, that helps relieve that burnout. It helps you feel healthy, and man, calendaring is all part of that. So I don't want to oversell calendaring because again, it's kind of like seems boring, but man, it is so important and essential for helping out your communications or creative team.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so giddy up, let's go.
Let's go,
Saying
partner.
because we're about to
Let's
jump into
wrangle this
about,
presentation.
about to corral these best practices. I'm very excited. Um, Also, I'm not going to say calendaring, but you
Okay.
can keep saying it.
I'll keep saying it. I got it.
Then we can do a vote later if it should be a
Sure.
real word
Yeah,
or
let
not.
us know in the chat.
Um, John Mark Comer says disciples, and now it's not a verb. So
See.
you got something against you. And
Hmm.
anyways, I won't get into an argument with my co-teacher on the
I love it.
so real quick, as we jump in, because we're spending the rest of the time on like practical,
Yeah.
uh, how to do this. So we want to get into it just real quick. We've covered these already, so I'm going to fly through them. One of them is a little newer though, just 2 key mindset shifts. So
Yeah.
one, this is the newer one. Ministry requests represent people, and without those people, there wouldn't be a ministry or church. Handling those requests with care and planning means placing a high value on people's experience and journey. So this is kind of the one for us because we've been talking about, and we'll talk about in a second. This is an internal agency. You have clients,
Yes.
and all the fun stuff that comes with clients. And a lot of this focuses on like our felt needs and our problems, which makes sense because that's who this community is for. But remember who you're serving, because without these other teams, there would be no ministry. One, you wouldn't have a job doing this.
Yeah.
Or if you're a volunteer, you wouldn't have this place to exercise your passion, what God's
Yeah.
calling you to. But two, like, we are working together, and there's going to be tension in any relationship. There's going to be conflict in any relationship. So this is all just how to manage a part of a healthy relationship. So just remember that this all has to serve people. It's all about people. It all adds up to effectively reaching people with the message of Jesus. But then, too, the other mindset shift is that you do basically have an internal agency at your church. If you're leading communications at your church, if you're contributing to that, you need to start treating it like an agency, which
Yeah.
means you're running an agency, you have clients. So now you can start thinking about, how do I keep these clients happy? How do I serve them well? And how do we find the win-win-win, so our team wins, our clients win, and the people we're trying to reach win? We have plenty of other Art Speak universities on all those subjects, so check them out
Yeah.
if you need to. But yeah, so how do we get to the solution, Ryan? I know it starts with culture.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And the the mindset shifts definitely are part of culture, right? That's where it starts. But if you're leading a team, especially if you have if it's more than just you, two like ways to set the culture internally for your communications or creative team. I'm calling them the intra departmental clarity and the interdepartmental clarity. That's like a nerdy like I when I was in college, I my initial degree was intrapersonal communications, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. What is that word? So I learned all the difference between the two. But what we mean by intra-departmental, it means like internally inside the department, right? And a great way to set the culture there is this phrase, and I kind of learned this over time. But we're here to help our ministry leaders reach and serve people with our unique gifts. Understanding that, because sometimes there's confusion, is the communications or creative team supposed to set the pace, or are they supposed to kind of follow the pace of the ministry? And there's always what are we here to? It's different for every church, but I think if you can enter into it with this idea that at the end of the day, our team is here to help these ministry leaders. And we have gifts, we have skills that they don't, that they didn't go to school for, that they didn't get training on, that we do, that we have, and that we can help amplify their message. And so it's really just setting that norm, that cultural norm internally for your team is so huge. Starting at that place helps prevent future tensions. And again, it really just gives your team a sense of purpose and passion when these requests start coming your way. But then on the flip side of that, this is really important too. Something I had to learn the hard way over time. Interdepartmental clarity. So when we're talking to our other teams or departments at your church, it's so important that they know that we're here to help them strategize, not just execute. We're here to help them think through, to plan ahead, to expand and contract. That's one of the practices that we talk about here all the time at ArtSpeak. We're here on the front end to help make the idea as good as it can be with before even starting on it, right? Because I think oftentimes communications teams can just be seen as like, hey, I need this graphic done, just do it. Don't even think about it or try to make it better. I just need it to be done, right? But we really do, and it's helping set the culture across your entire team of saying, hey, we're here to help you do your thing to the best of its ability. And part of that on the front end is strategizing, right? It's not just waiting for you to send us requests so that we can do that. So that's the first part. And I would say the next part, Andrew, that you want to talk about is first we set the culture. And then the second part is create good systems, right? Systems are key. They're so important. What are some of the systems that you've found to be helpful for your team?
Yeah, well, if you haven't, make sure you watch last week's Art Speak University.
Totally.
We talked about some systems, but the one we're talking about today is the communications project calendar. So basically, like, I mean, that's the title of this talk. So if you
Yeah.
saw that, you kind of know that's what we're talking about. But this is like one of the key tools you need if you are leading communications at a church, or really anywhere. If you're leading marketing or communications or whatever,
Right.
is being able to have a marketing calendar or a communications calendar and be able to plan ahead. So just a couple practical things: create a literal, it could be physical, it could be digital.
Yeah.
I like digital. That's what I've used. I know Jason, when he's talked about how he had a physical calendar that was kind of like in the center of their office area, and that was kind of a hub for people. So whatever you do, just have a calendar that people can access, and it's view only.
Mhm.
So, if it's online, you can set view only. If it's in person, don't give markers to other ministries.
Just lock the door after the certain people that
Yeah,
come in the
don't leave
room.
them
Then,
out.
yep,
Some stuff might show up
exactly.
there. Um, but have a calendar, and the ideal is to have 6 months of stuff on there.
Yeah.
So this next 6 months ahead, we're going to get into meeting rooms in a second, and this is going to be driven by quarterly meetings
Hmm.
with the other ministries and a quarterly planning rhythm. Because basically every quarter you want, this is at least how I did it. You could do a slightly different cadence if you want, but every quarter have ministries, they have a due date, send their project request by a certain time. This is the way your team is going to know what's coming up on the calendar. And you're asking them to look at the next 6 months ahead, but they're doing this in a quarterly manner because things change, right? They might change even more quickly than quarterly at your church, but this is going to help that. It's going to help lessen that because now people know they have to do it quarterly and they're going to try to stick to stuff. This is going to kind of align a lot of things that you're not necessarily coming out and saying like, hey, like stop changing everything last minute. But by implementing the system, people are naturally going to do less and less of that. But have a request portal. Have uh, like we have a portal for our agency. You can choose the number of different things you might do, and then based on what you're requesting, um, you're going to have different questions. So that way, we have all the information we need to accomplish that task. So same thing. If a ministry is requesting, a sermon series art, there's certain questions you need to ask to be
Right.
able to provide for that. Basically, every time, right? If they are doing a little like a conference or something, or if there's the youth retreat that happens every year, multiple ministries do retreats. There's certain questions you need to ask to accomplish those things, right? So have that form request set up. We love using Asana. You can write forms in there. So
It's great.
I would just say use Asana, but like whatever you're using, there's probably a form request feature that you can have. Do that. And then again, this is going to be driven by a quarterly process. So in that quarterly process, again, Ryan will talk a bit more about it too. Um, Leading into that, you want to set a rating system. And this is one of the things I don't see talked about a ton, or if it is, it's kind of vague. So, few specifics I would throw out. Have a rating system for event requests. So
Yeah.
that could be either 3 tiers or four. I had 4 tiers. I think when Jason talks about it, he had three. Doesn't matter what it is. You can set your own criteria. Just one that I would like 100% make sure you have on there is how many people is this going to reach? Because if it's
Yeah.
less than half the church,
Yeah.
does it need an on Sunday announcement from stage
Totally.
multiple weeks in a row? Probably not, right? Like the men,
The relevance.
men's breakfast can be a little touchy. So I don't do another one because I thought that one would be. But
You're good.
basically, like youth small groups, if the small group
Yeah.
room is changing, right? That's maybe
Sure.
10 kids. They should have a system set up to communicate that. Whatever the ministry is, they should have their own systems to communicate smaller matters. And this is where when you kind of identify the tiers or the levels of types of events, like, hey, this is affecting more than half the church. Hey, this is affecting maybe a quarter of the church. So we still want to put some stuff behind it. Hey, this is affecting an entire ministry. And then maybe, hey, this is affecting a small section of a ministry. Those were the four that I dealt with. You could consolidate or expand those based on your church's needs. But hey, based off how many people it's affecting, that's going to affect the level of commitment and bandwidth our team and resources we're going to pour into it. Because, and we talked about this in the first one, like the time your team spends, like those are dollars, like you're getting paid to spend that time there. So once you start helping people see not just literal money, but like time being tied to the tithe of your church,
Absolutely.
that can impact a lot of things, and that kind of plays into which we'll try to wrap up with when we get to it is getting leadership buy-in.
Yeah.
And so once you have leadership buy-in on these tiers, what we did was then we would take the tiers and we would take the requests, we would rate them internally, and then we would meet with each ministry lead before the quarterly meeting. And then once you have those ratings, you would review them with the ministry lead. You'd be able to have a conversation in kind of a smaller arena. They're not feeling like they're getting called out in front of everybody or something. Like if you guys are disagreeing, totally fine. But then at the end of the day, they know what their events are rated, as in like how many people it affects. Maybe you have some tied to like resources it takes, the timeline. Like, hey, this is way far out. Yeah, we can totally put a ton behind this. Versus, hey, it's next week. Like, yeah, we'll try our best, but I think it's just going to get this one thing on the calendar. But you're doing all that so you can plot out everything it gets on this color coded calendar. Everyone can see what's getting announced when, what it's getting, social
Yep.
posts, emails, in person announcements, video announcements, whatever, marketing campaign like external ads. Uh, and then all you're doing in that quarterly meeting is just reviewing what people already know
Sure.
is reality. They have already accepted their ratings. But this quarterly meeting is going to give the chance for everyone to be on the same page, as well as if, you know, men's ministry wanted one more announcement on this Sunday. And maybe the other thing I would say is implement some rules. One rule I would have is no more than 3 in-person announcements. And then also 1 in 5 social posts can be promotional. Any more than that, so just those 2 criteria alone, that's going to kind of give you a roadmap for how you spend your marketing availability.
Yeah.
But then if leadership agrees on that, everyone's aware of it, then they can see like, oh, men's ministry wants this extra announcement, but hey, kids ministry thing was rated this, that's what it's getting. And now it's a conversation between those 2 ministries, and not
Correct.
like you're not getting
Correct.
triangulated. But Ryan, tell us more about the meetings.
That's huge. Like, and I don't want to miss. I don't want to skip over that point. Like, one of the best things you can do is when you build this system together with your team and you get leadership buy-in. When it's clear to the team, if ever there's any tension, it's not a way to abdicate responsibility, but it's saying, "Hey, we decided on these parameters for what's going to get this level of promotion, and the leadership team has decided that this thing is not going to meet that. So we're going to follow that lead, and we're going to do this, and we're not going to do that. But if you have a problem, it's not with the communications team saying you can't do it, right? It's saying globally, strategically, as an organization, we've decided on this or not that. So anyway, I love that point, Andrew. But last thing we wanted to hit here really quick, that y'all can also kind of start implementing. So that quarterly planning meeting, Andrew, you were talking about that. That's the one where all of the leaders are getting together. We're looking at the calendar 6 months out. We're making sure everything is seen, making sure things aren't overlapped on the calendar, making sure resources are put in the right place. And again, ideally, we've already built that calendar before we get into the meeting, right? Sometimes that's not the meeting where we're adding new things. Often that's the meeting where we're evaluating what's already on the calendar to make sure that things are right, make sure that things are going smoothly, right? So that's the first kind of meeting that we would recommend that you establish if you don't have that. A quarterly planning meeting with you, your church leadership, and then maybe a few of those key big ministry leaders as well. But apart from that, another meeting to consider is a monthly department meeting. So that's where you, as the communications or creative director, would sit down with one department per month, right? Or you could do multiple a month. I actually like to do, I think I ended up doing 2 this month, 2 that month. I had 4 big teams that I met with. So it was an every other month for each ministry. But it's basically, it's not the rest of the church. It's not the leadership of, hey, what's everyone doing? It's the monthly connect to say, what is your ministry doing? What do you want to do? What are you looking forward to? What are some events? What are some things you want to try? And it's just a regular touch point to collect some ideas and to really, again, start getting ahead on things. But it's also, I've learned, a great place where those ministry leaders can just feel heard, empowered, and supported in what they're trying to do, and not just like alone and siloed and isolated, right? They feel really much a part of the team when you can set up that intentional monthly check-in with them and what they're doing. And then the last meeting rhythm that we would recommend is a weekly team meeting. So again, if you're not just one person on your team and you've got a couple people, I mean, this can be true for volunteers as well. Meet with your communications team, meet with your creative team once a week. And we recommend doing that at the beginning of the week on a Monday if you can. If you're in the office, some churches take Mondays off, but however you do it, try to get it close to the beginning of that week and talk about, hey, what are we working on this week? What's on our plate? Are there any bottlenecks? Are there any barriers? Any challenges? Especially as the leader of that team, it's really your role to make sure that the team is set up well for that week to get stuff done that they need to do, but also alleviate any problems, and also maybe get ahead. Maybe you need to get a little bit more clarity on something. One last thing from this team. So, but we didn't know that till this week. So establishing that weekly internal meeting rhythm as well is huge. And that is less so about the calendar stuff. And that's more so saying, hey, the calendar's set. What are we moving ahead this week? What are we pushing down the field? What are we progressing on this week as it relates to all the stuff that we have on the calendar? So yeah, that's our insight. That's hopefully it's good for you. I was trying to think of a cowboy pun. I could not think of one fast enough. But and we'd love to see what are you guys thinking. You guys have any questions for us? Love to answer the questions that you have. I think I see a few coming in here now. Okay, great. Hey,
Good
Jared.
stuff, guys. Hey, y'all, I'm back. See,
He's
like
back.
I warned you, I'd be back around at
You
the end
did.
here.
You did warn us.
So, probably the most important question we have here is, what other cowboy words do you know, Andrew? And I think
Sure.
you've already flexed that muscle, in the chat. So I just
Yeah,
want to call the attention there.
definitely.
Um, but Corey asked a great question. Any ideas for a siloed communications team that's looking to build relationships across departments? Because that's kind of like maybe the
Yeah,
essential part that has to be there before you really start trying to do this. So just to
that's
start
great.
there real quick, just any quick thoughts there?
Yeah. I think ultimately it more than likely has to start with you, right? If you as the communications person realize that there's some siloing happening, the chances that the other teams are going to take the initiative to come to you is probably pretty low. And so that would be the first thing: is know that probably the ownership is on you to change that, not in a
Hmm.
pressure way, but just like, hey, I want to make this better, so let me make this better. So that's one, probably just
Wow.
being
Yeah.
proactive. And then two, I would just say start with the humanity of the other person and saying, I'm hey, let's relate to each other, not as just like you're the kids person and I'm the communications person, but like let's start together as like we're teammates, we're friends, where you're obviously you've given your life to ministry. Tell me about that. Just starting to invest in that personal relationship and break down some of those barriers goes a long way. You're not going to be best friends with everyone you work with. That's not what we're saying, but take the initiative and try to really invest in the relationship on the front end and build
Hmm.
trust there, and then the good working relationship I think will come from that.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I'd add to get leadership buy-in. I already kind of said it, but like if you have leadership buy-in, that goes a long way too.
Yeah,
Because leadership, sets the vision, sets the culture. If you don't have leadership buy-in, you're trying to make something happen on your own. I mean, hopefully, we have like a nice team we're working with, but there is even on the nicest team, there's going to be the underlying thought like, well, why should I do it this way? Leadership doesn't care. Like, and
Hmm.
everyone else is busy enough trying to do things the way they've been doing it. So, you
Yeah.
it goes a long way having leadership help implement change. Once I had leadership on board with the changes that I implemented, it helped everyone align with that because the vision that was set was this will be more effective.
yeah,
And if everyone's on the same page trying to be more effective to reach more people, then that just goes a long way towards aligning everybody as well.
that's great.
Yeah. Similarly, we have a couple questions here. How do you approach that conversation with your leaders? With maybe kind of the primary leadership that you need to have kind of setting that tone and backing you up on that.
Yeah,
What are maybe some practical ways you have that conversation? How do you approach that with them? And
that's great.
you guys kind of
um,
address that in there, but I
yeah,
think go deeper a bit on that.
one thing
Yeah,
that I learned quickly was positioning the system, building good systems as their communication team, right? For these leaders, talking about like executive leadership, it's like you don't want to be making the decisions week in and week out on what gets elevated to what, and or even like what the kids ministry should or shouldn't be doing. You want to give them autonomy. You probably want to empower them. And so let our team build the systems to execute that well, because ultimately that's what we all want, and alleviate some of the stress from them for the systematizing part. That was key for me. That helped shape it, why we needed those systems for my executive leadership team.
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. And when you have leadership behind that, ensures you are implementing the leadership's vision.
Yeah,
Um,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
otherwise you're just trying out your own thing. So there is that, and when you have that conversation, you can be like, "Hey, I want to make sure this thing that I'm trying that I want to try that I think will make us more effective aligns with like what you want." So
that's great.
one, that's empathizing, being on the same team, working
Hmm.
together.
Yeah.
But two, also just pitching the benefits, and also probably not even before you pitch the benefits, just being like, "Hey, here's the problems I'm running into," and you can
Yeah,
list off
that's great.
whatever it is, like have like, hey, like I've had a lot of late nights, stuff like that. You can have that in there, but if that's all you have in there, it might not be as effective as also putting in like, hey, like these last minute requests repeatedly come in, and even though I do late nights, so that's kind of how you're putting it in there. Like even though I do late nights to make it happen, like I know it could be more effective. And then especially if you've probably had at least one thing, I hope, where you've known about it in time, you knocked it out of the park, be like, hey, remember this thing that went really well and this many people came and here's the stats.
Yeah.
I kind of shared a little bit of that on our first one, like with the kids ministry thing where they could post whatever they want. I'm like, here's the post you had. Some of them literally have zeros next to them for everything. Here's the ones I did. I only did 2 of these. And that's also because I know there's a question on how you can reposition yourself as like a strategist with the
Yeah,
ministries. Show
Yeah.
them
We'll go there
examples of
next.
your success when they've
that's great.
followed your process.
That's great.
And if you haven't had that yet, just ask them to do it like, once or twice.
Yeah,
And like
Yeah.
the results are. And then you can, like, numbers don't lie, results don't lie. Like, just compare them and be like, hey, here's what happened when we did it this way. Like, what if we tried that a few more times? And one thing, two other things, it's kind of like one and a half. It's a process to build the process. So, like, don't expect to, even if you get
100%.
leadership buy in, right away. Like it's not going to change overnight. Like you're going to have to show the benefits of this, as well as like manage tensions, manage relationship. Again, that's part of any relationship is
Yeah.
tension and conflict, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just how you manage it. Could be, but that's going to play into just having the results that show success
Yeah,
and show benefits for everybody.
Yeah. Awesome.
love it.
That question you kind of touched on a little bit. How does a comms director reposition themselves as a comms strategist for the ministry? I think you guys have hit on that. There's nuggets of that solution in here all the way through. But before we go, any comments directly to that one? I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, I think one conversation, and this actually didn't even come from me, but I used it when the ministry leader came to me. They said, "I know how it, if you can get the kids here, I know how to make sure they have a great experience." I think it was some sort of kids ministry event, right? Like I know how to do it. I know how to like help kids have fun when they're here. What I don't know how to do is get them here. And so, can you help me with that? That was a conversation I had, and that was so great. And then that for me, that gave me a perspective saying, I think the positioning is maybe it's that you may have ministry leaders that are great at social media. Man, the last church I was at, the student pastor, that dude could design his own stuff. He was great, and so we empowered him to like be able to do that. But more often than not, it's just saying your passion and your skill set is doing the thing of the ministry, right? And you're really good at that, and you love that. Don't stress about how you're going to get people to the thing that you're good at. Let me do that. Like that, it's almost it's viewing the partnership that way,
Yeah,
and not
that's
in a
good.
way that's like mandating it. Because if they want to help get people there because they do have those skills, great. Let's collaborate together. Let's use your ideas. But the value to them is, what if all you had to worry about was when people got there, they had such a great time, they were served well, they left with a deeper love for Jesus, and what I have to worry about is helping you get the word out there and help you amplifying that in the right places in the right way, and I'll carry that burden. And then once you're there, you do your thing. Like viewing it that way in that kind of
Hmm,
perspective it was helpful for me. And again, I didn't even get that myself. That was given to me. I was like, I like that. I'm
that's
going to use
good.
that. So
Yeah, I'd say like definitely focusing on that, and as part of that, um, like just showing the benefits. Like, hey, let's try it once and build from there, and then also knowing your process. So if when there's a conference, you need these questions answered on this timeline. If you don't know your process, then like you don't know what you don't know, and you can't invite people into it. And that was one of the things that I struggled
mm,
with was my
yeah,
experience when I was before I implemented this system. Once I saw a lot of these felt needs, I learned more about what goes into each of these common things, and then I was able to implement the system. But you need to know your stuff, and if you don't know your stuff, find resources. This is a resource. There's plenty of other great resources out there on social. A lot of great resources for church communication leaders and processes. But ask other people, like ask other people in your field. There's people in the community that would love to speak into that in Slack.
yeah,
But yeah, you don't know what you don't know. But once you do know it, then you can speak from a position of expertise, not that you're better than anyone else or you know all this stuff, saying like, hey, like for this type of thing, it would take this amount of time and probably this amount of feedback. So yeah, right now it's not like we can't do it that way, but let's try it this way the next time. And I'd love to show you how great it could be. So let's set up a next time that you have this type of event. Let's have a strategy session this far out. And now that's in their head. Like they're not going to ask you to strategize. They don't even know that you want to do it and when to do it.
So good.
That can be hard enough on your own, right? So just like if you keep hitting loss after loss, even after trying to do this system, just be like, hey, next time you have one of these things, just try to find that one easy win. Next time you have this thing, let's have an ideation session for 30 minutes in person, um, this many weeks out. And now that's in their head for next time. And if they don't do it too, and you have leadership buy-in, that's where you can be like, hey, like, I've tried all these things. We gave this specific next step. Why didn't that happen? And again, approaching it as a problem to solve together, because then they might be like, oh man, there's just a lot going on, or oh, I didn't think I needed to, or whatever. And then you can address whatever reality is. So identifying reality, showing the benefits of what could be, and then moving into that together.
That's
So
good.
good.
I remember when I was in this position in an internal team at a church, and one of my designers said, well, we need to be for the ministries what we're saying we're going to be for them, for the church. If we're telling them we can help them be strategic with their ministry externally, then we need to be strategic in how we're interacting with them.
That's great.
And that's kind of what you guys are saying is, they're the hero, and you're going to be a guide and help them do what they know they need to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good stuff. Sweet. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you all so much for taking us through this and spending some time discussing it out. If you have any other further questions, anything you want to kind of share stories or talk about, get in a group together with people who are in the trenches next to you or have been, join us in the community and drop your questions in there, interact there. There's just so much good stuff happening there. So awesome. We will catch you guys next time. Thanks so much, everybody.